On Christmas Eve of 1945, a fire consumed the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia. 4 of the 10 children escaped, but 5 were never seen again. No bodies, no remains, no answers. In the years that followed, strange letters, photographs, and sightings haunted the family, keeping the mystery alive. Did the children perish in the flames, or were they taken in one of America's most chilling unsolved cases? The Sodder family was well known in the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia. George and Jennie Sodder, Italian immigrants, had built a life for themselves with their 10 children. By 1945, their household was lively and full of promise. On Christmas Eve, the family celebrated together, exchanging gifts and enjoying the holiday spirit. But before dawn, their lives would be shattered by an event that remains one of the most enduring mysteries in American history. Around 1:01 a.m., on December 25th, Jennie awoke to the smell of smoke. Flames had erupted in the house, rapidly spreading through the wooden structure. She and George scrambled to wake as many of their children as possible. 4 of them managed to escape into the freezing night, along with their parents. But 5 children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie and Betty, ranging in age from 5 to 14, were trapped upstairs. George tried desperately to save them. He attempted to climb the ladder to reach the upper windows, but the ladder that usually leaned against the house was missing. He then tried to start his trucks to move them closer and climb inside, but strangely, neither vehicle would start, even though they had been in working order the day before. Helpless, he and Jennie could only watch as the flames consumed the home. When the fire finally burned out, nothing remained but ashes and smoldering rubble. Yet as investigators sifted through the ruins, they found no trace of the children. No bodies, no bones, not even fragments. The Sodders were left with unbearable grief and a mystery that defied explanation. In the aftermath of the fire, investigators quickly concluded that the missing Sodder children had perished in the blaze. The official cause was listed as faulty wiring, and the case was closed. But George and Jennie could not accept that explanation. Too many details felt wrong, too many questions unanswered. First, there was the fire itself. The Sodders insisted their wiring had been inspected recently and deemed safe. More troubling was the lack of remains. Even in fires that burn at high temperatures, bones are usually found. Experts later noted that the blaze at the Sodder home burned for only 45 minutes, far too short to completely cremate 5 bodies. The absence of remains gnawed at the family, who began to suspect that their children had not died in the fire at all. Then there were the strange events that surrounded the tragedy. In the weeks before Christmas, the Sodders had noticed unusual activity. A stranger appeared at their home, offering to sell George life insurance. When he refused, the man allegedly warned, "Your house will go up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed." Another visitor asked about the family's electrical box, making comments that seemed ominous in hindsight. The Sodders also remembered how, during the fire, crucial tools for rescue seemed to vanish or fail. The missing ladder, the disabled trucks, were these coincidences or signs of sabotage? For George and Jennie, the fire no longer looked like an accident. It looked like part of something larger, something sinister. The seeds of suspicion were planted. The Sodders were convinced that their 5 children had not perished in the flames, but had been taken. As weeks turned into months, the Sodder family searched desperately for answers. Jennie wrote to experts across the country, asking if fire could truly erase all traces of 5 human bodies. Every reply she received confirmed her doubts. Even in far longer, hotter fires, bones and teeth should have remained. The absence of remains was more than unusual. It was nearly impossible. George began to hear whispers around town. Some locals claimed they had seen the children alive after the fire. A woman at a motel said she saw them accompanied by strangers on Christmas morning. Another reported seeing them at a rest stop along the highway. These accounts were inconsistent, but they all carried the same implication: the children had been taken. Suspicion grew darker when the family recalled their outspoken political views. George Sodder was known for criticizing Benito Mussolini, the Italian dictator, which made him unpopular among some in the Italian-American community. Could the fire have been an act of retaliation? Were the children kidnapped as part of a threat? Adding to the mystery was the strange behavior of officials. The fire department took hours to respond, arriving long after the house had burned to the ground. The coroner's jury ruled the children dead in record time, with little investigation. When George tried to appeal, he was dismissed. To the Sodders, it felt as though someone wanted the case closed quickly, without questions. Unwilling to give up, George and Jennie vowed to continue searching. They believed their children were alive, and they would spend the rest of their lives chasing every lead, no matter how improbable. In the years that followed, the Sodder family gathered a trail of strange and haunting clues. A bus driver claimed to have seen balls of fire falling onto the Sodder roof on the night of the blaze, fueling George's suspicion that the fire was deliberately set. Another woman reported seeing the missing children at a Charleston hotel weeks after the fire, accompanied by 2 men and 2 women, who appeared to be of Italian descent. Jennie Sodder also began to receive cryptic messages. In 1949, after years of pleading, George persuaded authorities to reopen the case. A fresh search of the property turned up a few bones and a piece of what was believed to be a human heart. But experts soon determined the heart was actually beef liver, deliberately planted to mislead investigators. The bones, meanwhile, were later tested and found to be far too old to belong to the Sodder children. Then came the most famous clue of all. In 1967, more than 20 years after the fire, Jennie received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a photograph of a young man in his 20s, resembling one of her missing sons, Louis. On the back was a cryptic message: Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Ilial boys, a 90 fuamis, or 35. The handwriting was unfamiliar, and the meaning unclear. The Sodders clung to the photo as proof that at least one of their children might still be alive. They even enlarged it and displayed it on a billboard outside their home, along with the story of the fire, pleading for answers. The mystery only grew deeper. Were these genuine sightings and messages, or cruel hoaxes feeding on the family's grief? The billboard outside the Sodder home became a landmark. For decades, travelers passing through Fayetteville saw the giant display of the children's faces, alongside the haunting question, what was their fate? George and Jennie poured their savings into the sign, updating it with new details as leads emerged. It stood as both a memorial and an accusation, keeping the mystery alive in the public eye. Leads continued to trickle in, though none provided closure. A woman in St. Louis claimed she had overheard 2 men discussing the Sodder children as if they were still alive. Another reported seeing a group of Italian-looking men with children resembling the Sodders in Florida. Each story sent George across the country, chasing whispers that always ended in dead ends. Theories multiplied. Some believed the children had been kidnapped by a relative of the family, possibly spirited back to Italy. Others thought they had been taken as retribution for George's outspoken political views. Still others claimed organized crime had been involved, the fire set as a warning to silence him. Meanwhile, the official explanation remained unchanged: the children had died in the fire. Authorities dismissed the sightings as imagination or hoaxes, and many locals grew weary of the Sodders' relentless search. But for George and Jennie, hope never died. They could not accept that 5 children had been completely erased without a trace. As years passed, the Sodders aged, but their determination never faltered. They lived with the absence of their children as a constant wound, refusing to let the mystery fade into silence. By the 1950s and 1960s, the Sodder case had become a national curiosity. Journalists revisited the story, and magazines ran features about the family's relentless search. Theories grew wilder with each retelling. Some suggested that the children had been kidnapped by human traffickers and raised under false identities. Others claimed they had been taken by relatives in Italy and raised in secrecy, far from the reach of their parents. The photograph received in 1967 only fueled speculation. The young man in the picture bore a striking resemblance to Louis Sodder, but handwriting experts could not agree on the strange message scrawled on the back. The Sodders sent private investigators to Kentucky, where the letter had been postmarked, but they returned empty-handed. The sender was never identified. Despite decades of searching, George and Jennie never stopped. They wrote to the FBI, begging for federal involvement, but were told the case fell outside the Bureau's jurisdiction. Local authorities remained unmoved, insisting the children had perished in the fire. To the Sodders, it felt as though official channels had abandoned them, forcing them to carry the burden of the investigation alone. The family's persistence came at a cost. They poured money, time and energy into the search, straining relationships with neighbors who dismissed the case as hopeless. Yet their determination also inspired others. Visitors from across the country stopped at their billboard, offering theories, prayers, or sympathy. The mystery of the missing Sodder children had become larger than Fayetteville. It was now part of American folklore. By the 1970s, the Sodder parents were growing old, yet the mystery of their missing children remained the defining struggle of their lives. George passed away in 1969, still searching for answers until his final days. Jennie, devastated by his death, dressed in black for the rest of her life, a symbol of mourning for both her husband and the children she never stopped believing were alive. The billboard remained standing, weathered by decades of sun and rain, but still visible to all who passed through Fayetteville. It became a local landmark and a haunting reminder that the case had never been solved. Travelers stopped to take photographs, and reporters continued to revisit the story, ensuring that the Sodder tragedy was never fully forgotten. The surviving Sodder children carried on the search after their parents' deaths. They sifted through letters, photographs, and old rumors, trying to separate truth from hoax. Some believed the 1967 photograph truly was their brother Louis, while others doubted. Still, the possibility that their siblings had grown up under new names, perhaps never knowing their true family, lingered in their minds. Despite decades of searching, no definitive answers ever emerged. Theories continued to swirl: a kidnapping orchestrated by enemies of George, an adoption into another family, or a tragic accident covered up by officials. Each possibility carried its own weight, but none could fill the void left in the Sodders' lives. For the family, the fire was not the end of their children's story. It was the beginning of a mystery that consumed generations. Today, the fate of the Sodder children remains one of America's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Historians, investigators, and amateur sleuths have examined the case for decades, but no theory has ever been proven. Some believe the children perished in the fire, despite the lack of remains, their bodies consumed in ways science cannot fully explain. Others insist they were kidnapped, hidden away in another state or even another country, never to return home. The photograph sent to Jennie Sodder in 1967 continues to fascinate researchers. Modern forensic experts have attempted facial comparisons, but results remain inconclusive. Was it truly Louis, grown into adulthood, or just a cruel coincidence? Without DNA or definitive proof, the question lingers unanswered. The Sodder home was rebuilt, but the site carries a heavy legacy. For decades, the family's billboard stood as a monument to both grief and hope, until it was finally removed in the late 1980s. By then, the original generation of Sodders was gone, but the surviving children had passed their determination on to the next. The case is now part of American folklore, retold in books, documentaries, and podcasts. It is a story of love, loss, and the desperate need for closure, a reminder that sometimes the greatest mysteries are not crimes or conspiracies, but the questions left in the hearts of those who refuse to forget. The Sodder children's disappearance endures as a chilling echo of that Christmas Eve in 1945, when 5 young lives vanished into the smoke, leaving behind only silence and unanswered prayers. The mystery of the Sodder children endures nearly 8 decades later. No bodies were ever found, no proof of survival confirmed. Were they lost to the fire or taken into the shadows by unseen hands? The truth may never be known. What remains is a story of a family's unshakable hope, a tragedy that became legend, and a reminder that sometimes the most haunting mysteries are the ones that strike closest to home.